Welcome to becomeatechpro.com. In this session, we want to look at containerization best practices. I like to call this the double S of containerization best practices. Why double S? Emphasis is going to be on security and size. Now, starting with security, as much as possible, images that are built should be built out of official images. That way, we are going to be able to limit the risk of having malicious codes being introduced into our environment. For example, if we search Tomcats, we can see several images right here. Okay, you can see several images. You can see sponsored OSS. You can see verified publisher. You can see Docker official image. Okay, also see Docker official image up here. So as much as possible, you go for the one with the Docker official image badge. Okay, you can filter what you want to work with right here so that what you are seeing are only the official images. So that is very important for security, that images are created out of official images. That way, one limits the risk of having malicious codes introduced into one's environment. Okay, so aside that, there are vulnerability scanners that we can run on our container, right? So those vulnerability scanners help to introduce security into the environment. Now, if you look at these top cloud providers like AWS, Azure, and GCP, for AWS, right? We have Amazon, we have the Elastic Container Registry, and we also have Azure, that's the Azure Container Registry. Then we have the GCR as well. So for all these cloud providers, they have the vulnerability scanner available by default. You can see this is Azure. Let's take a look at AWS, right, to see this is also there by default. Let's take a look at GCR. Okay, you can see GCR also has that. That's the Google Container Registry. Also has the vulnerability scanner. But in a situation where you are not using either ECR, GCR, or ACR, right? And you want to have a vulnerability scanner, okay? There are also other providers. We also have other open source vulnerability scanners, right, that we can use. Let's take a look at some that we have here, okay? You can use any of the open source vulnerability scanners like Clear, there's Anchor, there's Dada, and OpenSCAP, okay? So these are other vulnerability scanners that can be introduced into the environment, okay? So let's see what we have here about that, okay? You can see with Docker, on Docker docs, let's see, vulnerability scanning. Okay, you can see, you can have Docker scan, right, to get the vulnerability scanning completed. Okay, so now let's look at something else under security. We've looked at creation of images out of official images, right? to limit malicious codes, to prevent malicious codes being introduced to environment, talked about vulnerability scanning. Then we can also look at ensuring that applications are run as non-root user, okay? So the Docker file should be set up for images to be built by non-root user. So that is another way to ensure security, okay? So now that we've looked at security, let's look at the other S. The other S talks about size. Let's look at it, size. In terms of size, as much as possible, we should create images from Alpine-based images. So what is Alpine? Alpine is a lightweight Linux distribution, okay? So if you have an image that has Alpine, we'll realize that those images could be 5 times smaller or even 6 times smaller than non-Alpine images, okay? So let's see what we have here about Alpine. You see Alpine is an independent general purpose Linux distribution designed for power users who appreciate security, simplicity, and efficiency. So this is where we are coming to. Alpine is, okay, requires no more than 8 MB and minimal installation disk requires 130 MB of storage. Okay, so Alpine is usually smaller. So how do we look out for Alpine images, Alpine-based images? So let's take a look at, okay, let's search this, for example. Okay, I'm on Tomcat. Let's check out our tags. We can filter with Alpine. Alpine. So you can see this is an Alpine-based image. So you can see what we have here. That's an Alpine-based image. Okay. So also, as much as possible, to ensure that our size is as small as possible, so you ensure that you do not copy unnecessary content. For example, let's take a look at okay, you should ensure that you do not copy any unnecessary files into your container. For example, if you have a repository containing several other documents, right? But if there are particular files that are not required for the container, for the image to be built or for the container to run, as much as possible, we can use the .docker ignore file, right? So that when we are copying, those files are ignored and they are not copied into the Docker file, okay? So also, when writing your Docker file, ensure that, let's take a look at a sample Docker file here. So when writing your Docker file, let's ensure that you minimize the layers, okay? You minimize the layers that get created. When you run the Docker history command, you should be able to see that the layers are minimized. Let's look at this, for example. We can look at this. You can see we have this, okay? So right here, you see a command. You can see it is possible that this is run separately, like stating run apt get updates, right? This can also be run separately, right? This can be run separately. Then this run separately, right? So as much as possible, it should be presented this way so that you minimize the number of layers. You can see this has been done in line with best practices, right? So this way, similar codes are run together. right? Instead of having to run them separately, okay? So we have apt update, apt get update, apt get install, but each separated for easy readability, you can see. So this is something that we should take note of. Okay, so we've looked at security. We've also looked at size. So let's take a look at what we've covered. In terms of security, images should be created out of official images. In terms of security, should run vulnerability scanners on the containers. Okay, in terms of security, we should also run applications as non-root user. Now, in terms of size, images should be created from Alpine-based images to ensure that the images are not unnecessarily large. Also, don't copy unnecessary files into the container. Okay, so we can use the Docker ignore file, okay? The Docker ignore file. Then we should also minimize layers by running similar codes together. So this is about all for now. So see you in the next session. Thank you for your time.